Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Pracha Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradari Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari Jai Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivra Jakacharya Astotara Satishishi Matis Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Jai Jai Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivra Jakacharya Astotara Shishi Mad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Prem Sakova Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Ki Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Shri Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Yamuna Mari Ki Tulsi Devi Ki Bhakti Devi Ki Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Sankirtan Yagya Ki Order Premanandi All glorious Samu devotees All glorious Samu devotees All glorious Samu devotees All glorious to the lotus feet of Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga, glorious to Srila Prabhupada. Namaste. Shrimati Devi Daswan. Namani Vachari Production to the Jarvanat. To the Karyama. Prabhu, would you mind reading Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita?
Yes, Mataji, I'm just reading.
Thank you.
In his room in the Radha Memorial, Avoy would rise daily at 4 a.m. and arouse his young neighbor, Prabhakar Mishra. From 4 to 5, Avoy would write. At 5, he would talk in the Anitya Tal area. At 5:30, bathe and then chant Hare Krishna on his beads until 7. When he would hold a class in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Srimad Bhagavatam, although Prabhakar Mishra was usually the only listener, at 8 he would return to his literary work, typing until after 10, when he would begin to prepare a meal. In the afternoon, he would often go around Jhansi, meeting people and preaching, looking for anyone willing to take part in the League of Devotees. In the early evening, he would write until 7, when he would prepare for the Kirtana and lecture he would hold at one of the various places in the city, depending on where he was invited. Although Avoy had no money for continuing back to Godhead, a well-established part of his preaching was to write essays, regardless of whether they were to be immediately published or not. He wrote a long essay, some 24,000 words, entitled Message of Godhead. He also wrote a series of chapters propounding the teachings of Bhagavad Gita, especially as they applied to the world problems, and Science of Devotees, a summary of Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, thank you. So this morning we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, the 4th canto, chapter 21, entitled Instructions by Maharaj Prithu, and it's text 23, as far as I understand. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Tasya metadanushthanad yan ahur brahmavadina lokasyu kama sandoha yasya tushyati trishtadrik. Tasya metad anushtanad yan ahur brahmavadina lokasyu kama sandoha yasya tushyati trishtadrik. Tasya metad anushtanad yan ahur brahmavadinah lokasyu kama sandoha yasya tushyati dishtadrik. Would anyone else like to chant, or shall I continue?
Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandot Pranam.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Tashyame tat anushtanan yanahu brahmavadina lokashya kama shandoha yasha tushtati drishtadrik. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
I can try, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, thank you.
Tasya metad anushtanad yan ahur brahmavadinaha lokasyu kama sandoha yasya tushyati. I can't see the screen anymore.
Dishtati, dishtadrik.
Dishtadrik. Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Well done.
Hare Krishna Mataji, I am trying as well.
Hare Krishna, thank you so much.
Tashyame tad anusthanad yam ahud brahmavadinaha lokasyu kama shandoha yasya tushyati dishtadrik. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Mataji. Tasya tadanushthanat yanahur brahmavadinaha lokaha shu kama shandoha yasya tushyati dishtadrik. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Mataji, I am also trying. Tashyame tadanugraha yanahur brahmavadinaha lokashu kama shandoha yasya tushtati dishtadri. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Tasya, his, may, mine, tat, that, anushtanat, by executing, yan, that which, ahu, is spoken, brahmavadinaha, by the experts in Vedic knowledge, lokaha, planets, syu, become, kama sandoha, fulfilling one's desirable objectives, yasya, whose, tushyati, becomes satisfied, dishtadrik, the seer of all destiny. Translation and purport by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Maharaj Prithu said, I think that upon the execution of my duties as king, I shall be able to achieve the desirable objectives described by experts in Vedic knowledge. This destination is certainly achieved by the pleasure of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the seer of all destiny. Purport. Maharaj Prithu gives special stress to the word Brahmavadina by the experts in the Vedic knowledge. Brahma refers to the Vedas, which are also known as Shabda Brahma or transcendental sound. Transcendental sound is not ordinary language, although it appears to be written in ordinary language. Evidence from the Vedic literature should be accepted as final authority. In the Vedic literature, there is much information, and of course, there is information about the execution of a king's duty. A responsible king who executes his appointed duty by giving proper protection to all living entities on his planet is promoted to the heavenly planetary system. This is also dependent upon the pleasure of the Supreme Lord. It is not that if one executes his duty properly, he is automatically promoted, for promotion depends upon the satisfaction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It must ultimately be concluded that one can achieve the desired result of his activities upon satisfying the Supreme Lord. This is also confirmed in the first canto, second chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, Ata Pumbir Dvijashishta Vanashrama Vibhagashaha Svanushthitasya Dharmasya Sangsiddhir Haritoshanam. The perfection of one's execution of his appointed duties is the ultimate satisfaction of the Supreme Lord. The word Kama Sandhuha means achievement of the desired result. Everyone desires to achieve the ultimate goal of life, but in modern civilization, the great scientists think that man's life has no plan. This gross ignorance is very dangerous and makes civilization very risky. People do not know the laws of nature, which are the rulings of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because they are atheists of the first order, they have no faith in the existence of God and his rulings, and therefore do not know how nature is working. This gross ignorance of the mass of people, including even the so-called scientists and philosophers, makes life a risky situation in which human beings do not know whether they are making progress in life. According to Srimad Bhagavatam, 7th Canto, Chapter 5, Text 30, they are simply progressing to the darkest region of material existence, Adanda Gobir Vishitam Tamashram. The Krishna consciousness movement has therefore been started to give philosophers, scientists, and people in general the proper knowledge about the destiny of life. Everyone should take advantage of this movement and learn the real goal of life. Om Agyana Tamarandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chaksham Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Hare Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. I read the translation again. Maharaj Prithu said, I think that upon the execution of my duties as king, I shall be able to achieve the desirable objectives described by experts in Vedic knowledge. This destination is certainly achieved by the pleasure of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the seer of all destiny. When I was a much younger person and a very young devotee, my spiritual master, he told me, at the time I was living in the ladies' ashram down in Wellington under the guidance of Krishna Loka Mataji and my spiritual master, and surrounded by wonderful ladies in the ashram, but still as a young lady surrounded simply by young ladies. My Guru Maharaj, with a half smile on his face, he said, let Srimad Bhagavatam talk to you. I think you will all understand if you're ladies, and if you are married to ladies, then this was a humorous but actually very practical and most importantly a great benediction of an instruction to receive. Let Srimad Bhagavatam talk to you. So my small realization in relation to this instruction is that we can allow Srimad Bhagavatam to speak to us. Srimad Bhagavatam can give us the greatest solace in whatever situation of life we may be in. It gives us the kind of solace that a very close friend can give. And we can perceive this if we give it time. It is, of course, Krishna himself, who is, as we know, Sufridam Sarvabhutanam, the best and well-wishing close friend of all living entities. And another point that I feel is that Srimad Bhagavatam can teach us how to be. So in this chapter, we ask ourselves, how is Srimad Bhagavatam speaking to us? What can we learn so far in this chapter entitled Instructions by Maharaj Prithu that can benefit us? We're always seeking things, like the what's in it for me. This is intelligent, actually. Of course, we see it applied in a very materialistic way, but still, we're always looking to evaluate things in terms of what benefit can they give me. So what can we learn in this chapter so far about as we're hearing about the activities of Maharaj Prithu? Well, we can practically perceive that by hearing about the divine qualities and power of Maharaj Prithu, that the heart becomes somewhat purified. Usually our hearts, our minds are besieged by the forces of anger and fear and envy, frustration, even madness and illusion. But when we hear about these wonderful qualities of Maharaj Prithu, then the heart becomes peaceful, it becomes calm, purified from these besieging forces. And the soul aspires for the ideal character that Maharaj Prithu demonstrates. Of course, he is not an ordinary person. As you all know, he's a Shaktivesha avatar, empowered incarnation of the Lord. But still, we see that the Lord cares very much about, and during his incarnations, empowered incarnations, by demonstrating an example for us all to follow. So Maharaj Prithu can teach us how to be. Now, we might not be kings, even great statesmen, prime minister, presidents. We might only work in an office. We might only manage a small department in the ashram or in a preaching center or at the temple, or we might not even have an administrative bone in our bodies. And we might just be running a home or working in a shop. We might be a student or working in a legal profession, but still we can let Srimad Bhagavatam speak to us and hear about these extraordinary qualities of Maharaj Prithu and aspire for this. the heart becomes immediately peaceful. There is solace here. So previously in this chapter, we heard that Maharaj Prithu he's described as Mahatmana, the greatest of the great personalities. With a divine power, and we hear about his personal beauty and how he carries that beauty in public, and the humility of his heart, although he's an exalted person and is in charge of a very high post, king. He carries himself with such humility, and we see that in the assembly here, where he's delivering these instructions in this chapter. Then first he honors the respectable personalities in his midst. He does this according to their positions. Now, of course, we remember present here, there are the demigods, the great sages, the personalities, the highest personalities from all over the universe are compelled to be here. This is actually due to the greatness of Maharaj Prithu, and he knows how to honor them and put his objective before them. In the previous verse, yesterday's verse, by the grace of the Supreme Lord, I have been appointed the king of this planet, and I carry the scepter to rule the citizens, protect them from all danger, and give them employment according to their respective positions in the social order established by Vedic injunction. He is saying this with great humility, presenting himself to them, having taken on the responsibility of this service. And in today's verse, he reveals his motivation. I think that upon the execution of my duties as king, I shall be able to achieve the desirable objectives described by experts in Vedic knowledge. This destination is certainly achieved by the pleasure of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the seer of all destiny. So Maharaj Prithu here, he reveals his inner motivation. And this motivation can be adopted by all of us, actually. Although we are not statesmen or women, we may not even have Kshatriya work in a Kshatriya-like occupation or have the Kshatriya nature. But this motivation is the correct motivation. And that is also taught by Lord Krishna in Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna. Perform your duty without attachment to the outcome, the fruit of your activity, and make your work an offering to the Lord. So your supreme objective is the Lord's pleasure. And due to the Lord's pleasure, then we will be able to attain the highest goal of life, the Paramagati, the supreme destination, and that is to go back home, back to Godhead. So Maharaj Prithu, he reveals that his efforts and his occupation are ultimately aimed at pleasing the Lord and going back home, back to Godhead. And this we can also do. I thought I'd speak a little bit from the Western perspective of somebody who came from a life of chaos and confusion and came across the Srimad Bhagavatam. Because at the end of this purport, Srila Prabhupada, he's emphasizing very much the purpose of the Krishna consciousness movement in terms of giving direction to people by presenting to them what is the ultimate goal of life. He says the Krishna consciousness movement has therefore been started to give philosophers, scientists, and people in general the proper knowledge about the destiny of life. Everyone should take advantage of this movement and learn the real goal of life. This might bring to mind for you the Srila Prabhupada's preface of Srimad Bhagavatam. Right at the end of his preface, he quotes a verse from the 5th chapter of the 1st canto, verse 11. He says, that literature which is full of descriptions of the transcendental glories of the name, fame, form, and pastimes of the unlimited Supreme Lord is a transcendental creation meant for bringing about a revolution in the impious life of a misdirected civilization. We can perceive when we come to Krishna consciousness, especially if we're coming from Western so-called culture, which is chaos, that there is something subtle is felt which brings about a whole revolution in our lives, and that is knowledge of what is the ultimate goal of life. Everybody in materialistic culture is acting as if they know what the ultimate goal of life is. But they have no idea. They're acting on an assumption that the goal of life is sense gratification. In their minds, they will admit, I don't know what the goal of life is, but I could sure use some money. So they're moving about their lives, making money, thinking that by this money and through their sense gratification, through our sense gratification, then happiness will be achieved. That the goal of life is sense gratification. It's an assumption, but there is no definitive knowledge for people. What is the ultimate goal of life? So when we come across the Srimad Bhagavatam, such a revolution happens within our lives. This knowledge, what is the ultimate goal of life? To go to please the Lord and to go back home, back to Godhead. This knowledge has a great organizing power in our life. Imagine you're on a journey, but you don't know what the destination is. It's round and round in circles, all over the place, stunned, confused, paranoid, distressed. But when we understand what is the goal, it's like you have a navigation system, Google Maps, for example. Then you can put your destination into the navigation system. At the same time, you can get your starting point. You can see your current location, you can even see now the steps that you are going to take. There's a button you can push, you can see the steps that you're going to take, the turns that you're going to take in this navigation towards your destination. I'm going to plug in my phone, excuse me. So all of a sudden, one's life has purpose, direction. It is an absolute revolution. Now, in Srila Prabhupada, in this little book called Perfect Questions and Perfect Answers, Srila Prabhupada describes the goal in a beautifully metaphoric way. The goal, when questioned about the objective of the Krishna consciousness movement by a person called Bob, Srila Prabhupada responds, to go back home, back to Godhead. That is the real goal of life. The water that comes from the sea forms clouds. The clouds fall down as rain. And the actual goal is to flow down the river and again into the sea. So we have come from God, and now we are embarrassed by material life. Therefore, our aim should be to get out of this embarrassing situation and go back home, back to Godhead. This is the real goal of life. He references Bhagavad Gita, 8th chapter, text 15. After attaining me, Lord Krishna explains to Arjuna and to us, the great souls who are yogis in devotion never return to this temporary world, which is full of miseries, because they have attained the highest perfection. Samsiddhim paramam gataha. So this paramam gati, the highest perfection, the Lord says, never again return to this material world, get out of this material world and rejoin him. Goloka Vrindavan. So this is revolutionary knowledge. To attain this goal, the Lord teaches in the Bhagavad Gita the system of karma yoga. And Maharaj Prithu is demonstrating the dutiful execution of duties allocated to him according to the Varnashram system. He's a Kshatriya. Now, which means to give protection to the citizens. So in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna teaches this yoga, connecting to him through one's activities. And he teaches it in 3 steps. He teaches it in terms of acting according to our nature, which is we are endowed with when we take this material body, and all living entities thus follow the ways of life according to the modes of material nature. So Krishna teaches that we should act according to this nature. What will repression accomplish? We act according to our nature, not resist it, but according to it. And that's the first step. And the second step is to act without attachment to results. So to execute our work give it our best effort, but understand that the result is not necessarily within our control, and we shouldn't cling on to the outcome. We should not try to enjoy the results of our work. And the third step is to make that work an offering of love to the Lord, to fix one's mind. To Arjuna, he says, fight and think of me. To make that offering an act of devotion to please the Lord. So at our outreach centre here in Auckland, we try to give this knowledge to people. And recently we were presenting that just this first step to people that we should act according to our nature. This is such a relief for people. You see people just, as we were discussing it, you'd see people's faces just soften and be relaxed, and such, a wave of relief comes across people. This is the insanity of our current culture. We, without understanding the real goal of life, without acknowledging that there is a divine order of things and it's under supervision of a supreme authority of the Lord, then there is chaos and confusion to the extent that people they really don't even know who they are materially, what to speak of spiritually. And living in a state of resistance and struggle against material nature. So when we say the Lord teaches you act according to your nature, it's a great relief. You see many people find their jobs deeply unsatisfying, even soul destroying. You hear things like, my resume is basically a list of things that I hate to do. Or at work, sometimes I go minutes without checking how many minutes there are in the day. It's just agonizing for them. Or that they just like their job a little bit more than they like being homeless. So we were hearing from a young man who worked into his job at a top legal firm in London. And he walked in there, often when your first impression gives you a special darshan of the situation. He walked in and he could perceive that there were people in that environment, in that legal environment, who were right within their natural habitat. They felt at home, they were functioning at a high level. But for others, it was a soul-crushing machine that siphoned their vitality and demanded everything from them. And for those people, after work, he observed that they would go out and they would drink alcohol and sort of take shelter of intoxication just to escape from the sense of alienation and take the edge of the fatigue that their work was causing them. And we explored, what it is that keeps people working within a job that they hate. Of course, there are the rewards, this attachment to sense gratification, the rewards, money, and the sense gratification it promises, and prestige, and the more subtle sense gratification that promises. So the money, people, get a better, a bigger house, or bigger car, a nicer car, and a better neighborhood. And their sort of like their standard of living and also their expectations increases, but then they become trapped because they become attached to that, trapped in a job and a life which gives them absolutely no satisfaction. Simply misery. So there is a palliative, a nurse in palliative care. Her name is Bronnie Ware. She's an Australian woman who's written one book where she documents the questions and the responses she receives from patients within her care. And she asks questions to her patients like, they're close to leaving their bodies. What went really well in your life? Do you have any regrets? Is there anything you'd like to do, you would have liked to have done differently? And one of the top responses that she receives from people close to death is that I'd wish that I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself and not the life that others expected of me. So as we explore this topic of Dharma and how everything within the universe is ordered according to this divine Dharma, and that everything follows, everything basically is sustained by Dharma. The planets held within their orbit by the law of Dharma. Everything happening by the Lord's arrangement and governed by the laws of Dharma. This is a wonderful thing for people to understand, and of course to understand how they can bring their own lives in line with Dharma. For example, explain to people that an acorn, by nature's arrangement, an acorn manifests its potential as a mighty oak. The little acorn doesn't try to push out a lily and be anything that it's not, by the laws of nature, destined to be. So by the Lord's arrangement, we all have a certain nature and a work to perform. And naturally, we are going to be most satisfied working according to that nature, but completely satisfied when we can offer that to the Lord, and with our own nature we can please Him. This is a very practical teaching, of course. Bhagavad Gita, Krishna speaks Bhagavad Gita to give us practical instructions, and this is the science of karma yoga. It's very practical teaching how to live in this world in a comfortable way, according to our nature. Offer the fruits of your activities. Don't get hung up and anxious, thinking that you can control everything. Do your best work. Offer it to Krishna. This is a very wonderful way to live. And then, what does a devotee have to look forward to? we can look forward to aspiring in this lifetime or the next or the next or the next to achieve being the supreme destination, going back home, back to Godhead. This is most wonderful for people to hear. As Prabhupada says, everyone should take advantage of this movement and learn the real goal of life. He speaks in this purport about a problem. People do not know the laws of nature, which are the rulings of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because they are atheists of the first order, they have no faith in the existence of God and his rulings, and therefore do not know how nature is working. Thus, gross ignorance of the mass of people, including even the so-called scientists and philosophers, makes life a risky situation in which human beings do not know whether they are making progress in life. According to Srimad Bhagavatam 7.530, they are simply progressing to the darkest region of material existence, Adanta Gobir Vishatam Tamishram. If people could only see by their navigation system that this is their destination due to lack of knowledge, then they would be most alarmed. So it is our duty to try to give this knowledge to others, to inform them about what is the goal of life. And there Bhagavad Gita gives such a practical method, a blissful method for living and living peacefully in this world and obtaining the supreme goal at the end of this life. I wanted to, since mainly we've spoken a little bit about karma yoga, I wanted to talk in brief about bhakti yoga. Of course, that's the topmost yoga system, which Krishna continues to, goes on to explain to Arjuna that we make out the only goal of our life to please Krishna. And so in this relation, I wanted to read that. I'm reading at the moment this book. It's called A Bond of Love, Srila Prabhupada and His Daughters, and many of you may have read it. So in this book, these are the memoirs of as many female disciples of Srila Prabhupada. Gosh, I should count them. As many as the compilers of this book can possibly find all over the world. They've asked for memoirs and they've compiled them all in this big book. So they have this memoir from Gauri Devi Dasi. This was actually her memoir given way back in 1985, because she left her body at the age of 45 back in 1985. She's my heroine, book distributor, and I want to read part of her memoir because it reveals bhakti, and I'm sure she would say of herself that, and somebody who came across Srila Prabhupada's books from within the Western culture, and experienced a revolution in her life, and then since been distributing, and since then was distributing Krishna consciousness. Because we've been talking about how we should act according to our nature. Krishna's teaching to Arjuna in the Karma Yoga section of Bhagavad Gita. But here we hear something a little different. During a darshan in his room in New Dwarka, I was sitting next to Prabhupada and watching his expressions very carefully. One by one, devotees were presenting their preaching services to him on a college campus with newspapers or paintings for his book. So on college campuses with a newspaper or paintings for his books. Prabhupada looked exhausted as he leaned back on his pillows and nodded in approval. Then Rameshvara presented the book distribution report. Immediately, Prabhupada sat up, put his elbows on his desk, his chin in his hands, and grinned broadly. He looked like a young boy. Book distribution was dear to Prabhupada. I wasn't good at painting for Prabhupada's books, so I became a full-time book distributor, but I was a complete introvert. When I was growing up, I was so shy. Nobody ever heard a word I said. My father would say, "Elizabeth, speak up." I had a heavy, morose, grouchy, and intellectual personality, completely wrong for stopping and meeting people. I couldn't even carry on a light conversation or be non-threatening. In the beginning, book distribution was hellish for me, but I kept at it because I saw that other devotees relished it. And Prabhupada said, everything comes with practice. And I thought, if Krishna helps the others distribute books, he'll help me too. Even though I had a huge false ego and was puffed up, one day Krishna blessed me, and I suddenly found it easy to approach people, smile, and be free from the clouded personality that I'd had all my life. And I was free from it forever. I started liking approaching people, giving them books, talking about Krishna, and getting donations from them. I found that if I gave my heart and soul to book distribution, more love came from me. And Krishna used me more by making me more clever and quick-witted. Krishna can make the dullest stone-like person into the most brilliant poet and philosopher and joker. Anything can happen on book distribution. It's amazing. So this extraordinary devotee, Gauri Devi Dasi, experienced that by her desire to please Srila Prabhupada, having witnessed his oceanic smile in response to the book distribution report, by her desire to contribute to his pleasure, then she was able to overcome her own nature, which seemed to be completely contrary to the service of book distribution. In fact, she attributes it to Krishna, that Krishna can make the dullest stone-like person into the most brilliant poet and philosopher and joker in his service, for his service, if the devotee's heart is motivated in that way. There's another part of her memoir or her memories. So I'll just read. She was diagnosed with terminal cancer, and before she left New Dwarka in 1985 to go to Vrindavan, she gave this talk, and towards the end of this passage, she says, "The process of leaving the body definitely changes one's consciousness a great deal. It increases commitment and seriousness and surrender. Before I was hanging on to sense gratification, to the hope of material happiness, to so many illusions. Please, all of you, please don't be like me and wait until you're in the position that I'm in." So, speaking so many years later, Gauri Devi Dasi probing us, probing me to apply oneself to pleasing the Lord. And back to finish with Maharaj Pretu. Excuse me. This was his heart's motivation, actually. The pleasure of the Lord. Its destination is certainly achieved by the pleasure of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He acknowledges who is the seer of all destiny. So the Paramgati, the goal of life to please Krishna, to go back home, back to Godhead, just like the water from the ocean, which is evaporated and forms the clouds that then precipitates down into the rivers and eventually reaches back home, back to the ocean. Then that is if we were to put our life into the navigation system by Srila Prabhupada's mercy, then that is our destination. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandot Pranam.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
What a beautiful class in the morning, and citing your personal experience with your Guru Maharaj. And that's a very beautiful start. How your Guru Maharaj spoke to you about that Bhagavatam will speak to you one day. And that's how it inspires you. That you set out how Bhagavatam could talk to me. And then he narrated, yes, Bhagavatam speak once you read out, like great devotees, Pitu Maharaj. You know the qualities, you understand the qualities, you read the qualities, and the way he used to maintain his kingdom. And if you read it, you will realize how Bhagavatam speaks to you. Because when we read Pitu Maharaj's example, that teaches his humility and all other characters that catches our attention and make our goal to direct ourselves so that we understand the meaning of how Bhagavatam speaks to us. That's why Srila Prabhupada said, Atopumbi Dija Srishta Dharnasvan Vivagasha. So whatever the status you have, just do it in your best way. And the goal is Sharanustishta Dharmasha Samshuddhi Haritoshana. Once the Hari is satisfied, everything falls in place. So that example is taken care of from Pitu Maharaj. So when we read Pitu Maharaj on and try to understand his character, his activities, we fall in love with Srimad Bhagavatam. And that way, Bhagavatam speaks to us. And because here, Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport, when he started this movement, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah. When he started this movement, so he started this speaking to the public to make understand that philosophers, scientists, so that once they understand the philosophy of science of Krishna, then they can become the leader of the society and people will follow. He knew that sources, because Bhagavad Gita 3:21 tells us, Yat yat achakti sreshta tat tat evataro jana. So when the leaders are well aware of the purpose of Bhagavatam, and then rest of the people will follow accordingly. So that was the motive Srila Prabhupada started with this movement. So, and to make us understand what is the goal of life. as you give an example of how the rain, the water from the ocean evaporates, makes cloud, and then it rains. It goes to the river and finally reaches to ocean. So the cyclic operation tells us the goal of life. Similarly, we also need to understand what is the goal of life. Because people in general, they are in gross ignorance. They don't know what is the purpose of life. So Srila Prabhupada started this movement for a great philosophical benediction and benefit for the people in general, so that people can understand their goal of life. As you speak and read from this book, Gauri Devi Dasi, the bond of love is really very, very, very inspiring. That tells us once you fall in love with Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, you will surely be close to Krishna and you will get the goal of life. And Srila Prabhupada is there to help us. So that's all from me. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. That's amazing what you're saying. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much.
Luna?
Yes, Prabhu.